If you've watched really any of my videos, you've probably heard me talk about drawing the effective detail rather than drawing the actual detail. And the examples that most immediately spring to mind are foliage and natural bush scenes where there's an abundance and possible overwhelming abundance of detail of leaves and flowers and petals and things that we see that we are challenged to capture in our freehand pen drawing. But the same principle that applies to those natural objects applies for architecture. It applies to any scene where there's overwhelming detail. So how do we capture architecture? Here is the Hotel de Ville in Paris. Now, from front on, it's overwhelming detail, but with this half side-on view, with this angled perspective, the detail is in some ways compressed in a way that almost makes it incomprehensible to see, to draw. So it's a perfect subject for drawing by the effective detail, not drawing the precision of the detail, not drawing accurately what's there, but capturing visually what we see, for want of a better phrase, at a glance. I'm using a 0.1mm pen, but even so, it's a bit of a challenge. So we're both simplifying parts, leaving some parts out, but we have to capture enough of the main elements that our brain can still see what it is. And in my thinking, the main elements are the perspective angles. We need to get them right or it won't look right. And then we want to look at, if you like, the more plain architectural elements, the things that we see most clearly. And even at this view, the columns between the various either statues or windows are probably the plainest strips of area. And so we want to get those in place correctly. Now, the important thing, because of this angle, is that we capture the foreshortening. As these columns move further away from us, as well as becoming shorter with the perspective angles, they also appear to be getting closer and closer together as they move further and further away. So we need to capture that, and I still count. I count the number of columns I need to do before I get to the end of the section that I'm doing. Now, you'll notice that the section I started there because it seemed to me to be the easiest, clearest, plainest section and relatively close that I could do. And from that, I could then move around. I could go in really all directions, but use that as a reference point. I went up firstly, as I'm doing now, because by going up, I don't have to work out the width. I've already established that with what I've done underneath. I merely have to work out as, if you like, new commitment, the height. But I can use the height of what I've done beneath as a guide. And look, if you're finding this helpful, finding it interesting, please, why not hit the like button right now for me? And that helps me out as well. And if you look at what we can see in the photo, you can see that I'm not trying to draw that detail. I'm trying to find something of the essence of it that I can put on paper. And very often it's the shadows, and particularly in windows, where we have shadows being cast by at least the top of the window inset on to the side of the window, that's often a very effective detail to draw to capture the whole feel of the whole window. We also have, where the columns are, slight protrusions of the entablature. And I've tried to capture those too because they do create a bit of a rippled effect on the facade when we look along it from this angle that I think really adds to the feel of complexity. So I want to try and capture some of that at least, but again, I've done it in a fairly simplified way, almost as if it were a circular rather than a three-sided shape. All the time looking back at the perspective angles I'm creating and just checking before I commit too much, are they correct? Are they right? Now you're watching this, I think, 3 times normal speed. When we get to the tree, I do the tree 4 times normal speed because we're not really drawing trees with this, and it did take a lot of time. Sorry about that. Forgot to put the camera back on after I turned it off for something. But it wasn't a great deal, and really I was just positioning the outer edge of the tree so that I knew how much architecture I needed to draw. And when we have objects in front of other objects, it's, I think, essential to establish those first objects, or if not the first closest objects, at least to reserve the space that they will occupy before we try and draw whatever's behind coming right up to them. And particularly with trees. Trees can be a little bit forgiving because we can, to a point, manipulate their size without it really affecting our drawing. So you can see that I'm just going up and along and down. And as long as I work really hard at keeping the foreshortening tight, then it's fairly straightforward. I put tape around the border because I wanted to draw the same size, and it just gives me a further reference point to know for sure where my photo ends, particularly when I'm drawing something such as this. I know that, okay, this building needs to come within 2 centimetres, 3 centimetres of the left-hand side of the paper that I'm drawing on. And as I'm particularly working out the foreshortening going down towards the left-hand side of the building, that helps me tremendously. Now, the further away we go, of course, in some ways the more challenging it becomes to draw the effect of the detail, because there's more detail in a smaller area, or at least the same detail in a smaller area. And so simplifying the detail as we go further away, even from what we've drawn to capture closer, is again one of the challenges. Notice that I'm aligning the vertical elements that are above parts I've already drawn with what I've already drawn. Now, I don't do it blindly. I do check to make sure it does all work out. And if it doesn't, if to put it above what's underneath in the reference makes it look not quite right in the drawing, then I'll often move it slightly and try and find a compromise between the two extremes. But in this case, the tower of the Hotel de Ville fits nicely. If you want to watch this slower, you can use the cog icon that's part of the YouTube options that you have there to slow this down to up to half speed, which will bring it much closer to double speed of my actual drawing, which is probably a good rate to watch it. If you really want to get a sense of my line work and exactly what did I draw, and exactly what did I draw, and how did I draw it, and what order did I draw it in when I was doing the particularly detailed pieces. But what I would like to think is that when you look at my drawing at this point, and I have done most of the actual building by this stage, that when you look at it at a glance, you feel like I've drawn all this detail. And I really would recommend that you pause and you zoom in, or you just zoom in while you're watching and slow it down a bit and see exactly what I really draw. When I first began to draw a lot of big detailed architecture for my Instagram account, I would often get the comments of people found it was unbelievable the detail I'd drawn. Although when they zoomed in to have a better look at it, they discovered to their surprise I hadn't actually drawn it at all. And that was the start of my thinking, I'm actually not drawing the detail, but I'm creating the feel, the appearance of the detail. And it's clearly working because people think I've really drawn everything, and then are surprised when I haven't. And so then it became a more conscious choice, a more conscious development in my line work and my thinking. And particularly when I then began to draw freehand in ink, it became an indispensable part of the way I think and how I observe, because I'm observing not to see all the detail, but to see what are the key elements of detail here that I need to capture. And so we're going a bit faster now again for this tree. Gosh, I could have gone even faster, couldn't I? It did take a while to get the tree done. Notice there's a bit of back and forth with the pen, just trying to work out the heights of these chimneys. I almost drew them too low. I bumped them up a bit. It sort of depends what you want to align with. And at this stage, I would certainly say do what's accurate to the reference, but temper that with what's going to look right in the drawing as well. Sometimes if we've taken one part out a bit far, we need to take something else out a bit further than we should, even though we're now aware that is perhaps not super accurate to the reference, but it does make our drawing look more realistic. That's a very useful mindset to have, I think. And so just drawing the last of the details on this chimney. I have drawn a very detailed drawing of the Hotel de Ville fronton a few years ago now, but it's still probably one of my favourite drawings because I just think it's the most amazing building. I really enjoy every one of the few chances I've had to stand in front of it and look at it. But it was great to try and capture it in this, if you like, more informal way. This took me just under 60 minutes, maybe about 55 minutes to draw in real time. Probably a third of that time was spent in drawing the tree and in drawing the people and the fence in the front and the buildings to the side on the extreme left. So it's probably about 40 minutes to do the actual architecture, which really is pretty good, I think, for a building that's this detailed. I think it really shows that the technique of trying to see and then capture the effect of the detail is not just a good way to draw something that looks like what it is when it's very complex, but actually does not take nearly as long as we would think. And so that makes it a tremendously useful technique for location sketching. And I do have a playlist on drawing the effect of detail that showcases this technique with a vast number of different subjects, whether it's architecture such as this, whether it's leaves and foliage, whether it's flowers, whether it's brickwork, whether it's cobblestones, anything where we have detail which is simply too detailed to draw, but it's an important part of our scene and we don't want to lose it, as a way of capturing the effect and still getting all the benefit of that detail in our drawing. In some ways, I've done the same thing with this fence in the front. I've captured the effect of the fence. I actually haven't drawn all of the detail. I've simplified it. I've probably simplified it more obviously compared to the simplification of the building. But to my mind, it still reads and works well. It's a good drawing in for the eye. It leads us into the scene, but it also gives us a sense of distance between foreground and where we are as the viewer and the building, particularly the far end of the building. So it's always good, if possible, to have as deep a depth of plane as we can, and having something right at the front is a good way of doing that. But even things relatively close, we can still use this technique of drawing the effect of the detail, not the detail. So if you want more of this, go to my playlist. This will be on the playlist, and the end screen will link you to that playlist if you want to have a look for this technique in other areas. Now just working on this fence. And I did use a 0.1mm pen for the whole drawing. I almost switched to a 3 just to do the tree, partly to make it a bit quicker, 0.3 I mean, just to make it a bit quicker. But I didn't want to risk it being too heavy. Now just look at what I do for this building, which is actually the next building across the road. I wanted to give a bit of street context, but I wanted a strong sense that the Hotel de Ville had ended and that this wasn't part of it. So very light and very simplified rendering of those further away buildings. And then I decided to put someone in the front here, but they kind of turned out to be facing the wrong direction. I would have preferred them to have been walking towards us, but somehow they turned off to the left. And look, here we have it. What do you think? Now, I looked at this and then I thought, well, I put some hatch lines on to represent the slate grey of the roof, the darker value of the roof. And I thought, well, why not give it a go? Because I won't know if I don't try, and I've got nothing to lose by giving it a go. It really is just a quick sketch. So what do you think? I think personally, in retrospect, looking back, I think it perhaps clutters things a bit too much. I think I should have preserved the white open space, probably the largest open spaces on the building. So if I could turn back the clock, I'd probably take off those lines. I guess I could just roll back the video. But what do you think? Do you think it works better there or not? Let me know in the comments. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you enjoyed watching me draw the Hotel de Ville very fast. I certainly enjoyed doing it. As I said, I love this building, but it's a great example for the technique of drawing the effect of the detail, not the precision, not having to be accurate in every way. For many things, I think it's the really only viable option, the only viable way to do it. So if you want to give it a go, the photo, yes, on my channel community page again. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure that you're having fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.